The zombie apocalypse had erupted, and Mark followed the online instructions to fortify his entire yard, inside and out. He even installed surveillance equipment at the entrance. That night, a squad of soldiers came to the neighborhood, knocking on every door and organizing residents to go to a designated location for quarantine. Mark lay motionless on the floor, letting the soldiers knock incessantly until they grew tired and moved on to the next house. 2 weeks passed in the blink of an eye. Mark barely survived on solar power, but his food supplies had run out. He had no choice but to venture out in search of resources. As a seasoned scuba diving enthusiast, his gear came in handy once again. He put on his wetsuit and reinforced his limbs, giving him the ability to defend himself even if he encountered the infected. However, after searching several neighbors' houses nearby, Mark still couldn't find any supplies. It wasn't until he entered an open room that he encountered an elderly woman with paralyzed legs. The woman's daughter had married far away, and no one had taken care of her during the previous relocation. Mark felt great sympathy for the old lady's plight, but he had no extra food to share with her. The old lady just smiled and said that she knew the situation here like the back of her hand. Under her guidance, Mark reaped a bountiful harvest and even found a motorcycle, enabling him to collect supplies from farther away. The two relied on each other, and life gradually returned to normal. Mark felt that having someone to accompany him was nice, and he hoped to wait like this until the day the virus ended. However, one night, the old lady asked Mark to turn on the radio. An intermittent female voice came through, claiming that the government-established quarantine zones had completely lost control. If there were any surviving residents, they could gather at the Rosa River port, where people would take everyone to the Galapagos Islands by boat. Upon hearing this, Mark's heart stirred. Wasn't that where his sister had taken refuge? He decided to take the old lady with him to meet up the next day, but she refused, citing her immobility. Mark sincerely expressed that he would not abandon any companions. The next morning, when Mark packed his things and prepared to notify the old lady, there was no response from the intercom. A sense of foreboding arose in Mark's heart. He hurriedly ran to the old lady's house and found a note on the table that read, "I hope you can survive and live well." It turned out that the old lady had chosen to leave alone so as not to burden Mark. Mark's heart was filled with sadness. He then rode his motorcycle towards the port. Before leaving, he deliberately went to the nearest quarantine shelter. Although the roadblocks were still there, the tents built for living had long been dilapidated, proving that the voice on the radio had not lied. Going to the Galapagos Islands was the right choice. As Mark passed a mountain road, a large number of infected people suddenly rushed out from both sides. He stepped on the gas and narrowly escaped the encirclement. Before he knew it, he had fled to a temporary shelter. However, a large number of infected people poured out of the tents again, completely panicking him. Mark staggered out of the camp. Fortunately, it was not far from the port. Carrying his cat, Mark ran with all his might and finally escaped through the entrance gate before the infected could catch up, narrowly avoiding the zombies' pursuit. However, he couldn't feel happy because the port was full of ships, but not a single survivor could be seen. He didn't know if the person behind the voice on the radio had left or had already been infected. Mark didn't have time to think too much. He picked a speedboat at random and headed towards the Galapagos Islands.